Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of The Sabbath at Midnight. And I'll be discussing Poseidon and Atlantis. I want to go back and explain a little bit more about Poseidon. Reflecting back on Derek Gilbert's work, just so I can clarify to you that he identified Dagon/Dagon as Shemiaza, the fallen angel. And in David Flynn's work, he identified Poseidon with Dagon too. So for me, that equates to Poseidon may have been Shemiaza, a fallen angel, an immortal. So this entity never died. More than likely locked up in the abyss. So I wanted to some of this stuff I'm going to rehash so that way you get a full understanding of this of Atlantis. So we know Atlantis, it was a legendary island realm of the far west, which was sunk beneath the ocean by the gods to punish its people for their immorality. Now, the term Atlanteans was applied by the Greeks to the Phoenician colonies along the Barbary coast of North Africa, those living near the Atlas Mountains. Now, Diodorus Siculus, he describes their Titan mythology and wars with the Libyan Amazones. So these are the Amazons. Plato may have the same nation in mind for the names of the second Atlantean king. Sorry, I pronounced this right. Gadiaros, after a Phoenician colony near the Straits of Gibraltar. Other realms proposed by philosophers and writers which resemble Atlantis include the fabulous southern islands of Panacea and the blessed Haliades Islands. So Plato, in his works, Timaeus, he says, many great and wonderful deeds are recorded of your state. And he's talking about Athens in our histories, and he's talking about the Egyptians. But one of them exceeds all the rest in greatness and valor. For these histories tell of a mighty power, which is Atlantis, which unprovoked made an expedition against the whole of Europe and Asia, and to which your city put to an end. He's talking about Athens. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean. For in those days, the Atlantic was navigable, so they can sail through it. And there was an island situated in front of the straits, which by you are called the Pillars of Heracles. Today it's called the Strait of Gibraltar. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together. It was huge. Imagine that. And was the way to another islands. And from these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent, which surrounded the true ocean. For this sea, which was within the straits of Heracles, say Hercules or Heracles, is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance. But that, it's a real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a boundless continent. Now, in this island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire, which had they had rule over the whole island and several others, and other parts of the continent. And furthermore, the men of Atlantis had subjected the parts of Libya, which is part of Africa, within the columns of Heracles, and as far as Egypt, and of Europe as far as today it's called Italy, but it's called back then it was called Tyrrhenia. The vast power, excuse me, gathered into one, endeavored to subdue at a blow of our country and yours, and of the whole region within the straits. talking about the Straits of Hercules. And then Solon is that the guy who went and talked to the Egyptian priestess, if you remember that. He goes on to say that your country shone forth in the excellence of her virtue and strength among all mankind. She was preeminent in courage and military skill and was a leader of the Hellenians. These are the from Athens. And when the rest fell off from her, being compelled to stand alone, and after having undergone the very extremity of danger, she defeated and triumphed over the invaders and preserved from slavery those who were not subjugated, and generously liberated all the rest of us who dwell within the pillars. But afterwards, there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all of your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis, in like manner, disappeared in the depths of the sea. This echoes Isaiah 23 and possibly Ezekiel 26. For which reason the sea in those parts is impassable. See, now it's impassable. Before they can navigate through the sea, but now it's because of this destruction. There is a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsidence of the island. So, continuing with Plato, Critias, and some of Socrates, he says, if I can sufficiently remember and report the tale once told by the priests and brought hither by Solon, I am well nigh convinced that I shall appear to the present audience to have fulfilled my task adequately. This then I must at once proceed to do, and procrastinate no longer. Now, first of all, we must recall the fact that 9,000 is a sum of years since the war occurred, and is recorded between the Atlantean dwellers beyond the pillars of Hercules, and all that dwell within them, which war we have now to relate to in detail. It was stated that this city of ours, Athens, was in command of the one side and fought through the whole of the war, and in command of the other side were the kings of the islands of Atlantis. He's speaking about the 10 kings, which is also recorded to occur in Revelation of the Holy Bible, the return of the 10 kings, which we said was an island larger than Libya and Asia upon a time, but now lies sunk by earthquakes and has created a barrier of impassable mud, which prevents those who are sailing out from here to the ocean beyond from proceeding further. Now, as regards the numerous barbaric tribes and all the Hellenic nations that then existed, the sequel of our story, when it is, as it were, unrolled, will disclose what happened in each locality. But the facts about Atlanteans of that age and the enemies, of the Atlanteans with whom they fought, we must necessarily describe first at the outset. The military power, that is to say, of each of their forms of government, and those two must have give the priority in our account to the state of Athens. So, once upon a time, the gods were taken over by a lot, the whole earth according to its regions. This is echoing Deuteronomy. Now, according to the results of strife, for it would not be reasonable to suppose that the gods were ignorant of their own several rights, nor yet that they attempted to obtain to themselves by the means of strife a possession of which others, as in you, had better claim. So basically, when it's talking about the gods, it's talking about the dark angels, the fallen angels that didn't heed God's commands. When the people didn't want to listen to God anymore, he gave more to the nations of these angels. And that's how we ended up with so many religions. As you recount, going back to the 7 sages. So, excuse me. Still battling with this medical stuff. Continuing. So just by the allotments of the earth, they received each one of his own, and they settled their countries. And when they had thus settled them, they reared us up, even as herdsmen rear their flocks to their cattle and nurslings. Only it was not our bodies that they constrained, but bodily force, like shepherds guiding their flocks with stroke of staff. But they direct it from the stern, where the living creature is easiest to turn about, laying hold on the soul by persuasion, as by a rudder, according to their own disposition, and thus they drove and steered all mortal kind. So they were controlling everything. Now, concerning the allotments of the gods, that they portioned out the whole earth, here into larger allotments, and there into smaller, and provided for themselves shrines and sacrifices. Even so Poseidon took for his allotment the island of Atlantis, and settled therein the children whom he had begotten of mortal women. In a region of the island, the following description. Bordering on the sea and extending through the center of the whole island, there was a plain, which is said to have been the fairest of all plains and highly fertile. And moreover, near the plain, over against its center, at a distance of about 50 stades, there stood a mountain that was low on all sides. Thereon dwelt one of the natives, originally sprung from the earth, and this is going back to Evanor and Leucippe. And they had for offspring, they had this is going to Clydo or Clymene. They only had this one daughter. That's the only child they ever had. And when this damsel was now come to marriageable age, her mother died, and her father died. So, and Poseidon, now being smitten with desire for her, this sounds like Genesis 6, right? He wedded her, and to make the hill whereon she dwelt impregnable, he broke it off all around about, and he made circular belt of the sea and land, enclosing one another alternately, some great, some smaller, 2 being of the land and 3 of sea, which he carved, and he basically carved us out of the midst of the island. And these bouts were even distances on all sides. So it was impassable for man. For that time, neither ships nor sailing were yet in existence. And Poseidon himself set in order with ease, as a god, the central island, bringing up from beneath the earth the 2 springs of water, and the one following warm from its source, the other cold, and producing out of the earth all kinds of food in plenty. And this is going back to the 10 kings now. And he begot 5 pairs of twin sons, and he reared them up. And when he had divided the island of Atlantis into 10 portions, he assigned to the firstborn of the eldest son of his mother's dwelling an allotment surrounding it, which was the largest and best, and he appointed to be king over the rest, and the others to be rulers, granting each the rule over many men and a large tract of country. And to all of them he gave names, giving to him that was the eldest and king, after which the whole island was called the sea, spoken of as the Atlantic. Because the first king who then reigned had the name of Atlas. The name of the younger twin brother, who had his portion, the extremity of the island near the Pillars of Heracles, up to the part of the country now called Gyderia, after the name of that region, and Uranos in Greek, but in native tongue, Gadarios, which fact may have given its title to the country. And the pair that were born next, he called the one Amphores, and the other Euaemon. And the third pair, the elder, his name was Minos, and the other was Autocathion. And the fourth pair he called Elisippus, and the second Mistor, and the fifth Azes was a name given to the elder, and the second Diaprepes to the second. So all these themselves and their descendants dwelt for many generations, bearing rule over other islands throughout the sea, and holding sway besides, and was previously stated over the Mediterranean peoples as far as Egypt and Italy. Now a large family of distinguished sons sprang from Atlas. So Atlas was having kids, but it was the eldest who, as king, also passed on the scepter to the eldest of his sons, and thus preserved the sovereignty of many generations. And the wealth they possessed was so immense that like had never been seen before in any royal house, nor will ever easily be seen again. So they had plenty of wealth, and they provided with everything of which provisions was needed, either in the city or throughout the rest of the country. For because of their headship, they had a large supply of imports from abroad. The island itself furnished most of its requirements of daily life, metals to furnish to, they basically had everything there that they needed. They were basically a self-sustaining island, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. Having all the right, the mines and the copper and the precious metals and the gold, and this and the timber, this brought forth the abundance. They had fertile land too. Moreover, it contained a very large stock of elephants. From there was ample food supply, not only all of the animals which haunt the marshes and lakes and rivers, or the mountains or the plains, but likewise also for these animals, which is of its nature is the largest and most, ferocious, right? And in addition to all this, it produced and brought purification of all those sweet-scented stuffs which the earth produced, whether made of roots or herbs or trees, or liquid gums derived from flowers and fruits. And they cultivate a lot of stuff there, according to these writings. There was olives, there was orchard trees. So they had plenty, apples, and so it was a fruitful island, this place. And so they received all these products from the earth, and they furnished forth their temples and royal dwellings, their harbors and their docks, and all of the rest of the country, ordering all in fashion following. First of all, they bridged over the circles of the sea which surrounded the ancient metropolis, making thereby a road towards and from the royal palace. And they have built a palace that in the very beginning, where the settlement was first made by their god, and this is Poseidon, and their ancestors. So they called Poseidon a god. And as Each king received it from his predecessor. He added to its adornment and did all he could to surpass the king before him, until finally they made it an abode, amazing to behold for the magnitude and beauty of its workmanship. For beginning at sea, they bored a channel right through the outermost circle. And he's talking about the reshot that where Poseidon was, like a bunch of circles, and it was impassable. And in the middle of the circle was his palace. So that's what it's discussing here. And it was 50 stadies in length, and thus made the entrance to it from the sea like to that of a harbor, by opening out a mouth large enough for the greatest ships to sail through. So now they have ships in this time now. So before they didn't have anything like that, right? And so now they do. So moreover, through the circles of land which divided the sea over against the bridges, they opened out a channel leading to the circle to circle. So it was large enough to get through, and that's the whole thing. And they roofed over above, so that the seaway was subterranean. For the lips of the land circles were raised sufficient height above level of the sea. The greatest of the circles which boring was made for the sea was 3 stadies in breadth. And the circle of land which it was equal breadth, and the second pair of circles that the water was 2 stads in breadth, and that of dry land equal again to the preceding one of water, and the circle which ran through the central island, which is southward, was of stadies breadth, and that's a measurement. When it says that, stadies. And this island wherein stood the royal palace was 5 stadies in diameter. Now the island and the circles and the bridge were basically, everything was basically, the way they did it was like perfect. They encompassed a roundabout on that side of it with a wall of stone, and upon the bridges of each side over against the passages for the sea, they erected towers and gates. And the stones they quarried beneath the central island and all around, from beneath the outer inner circles, some of it being white, some black, and some red. And while quarrying it, they constructed 2 inner docks, hollowed out and roofed by native rock. And the buildings, some of these they framed of a simple color, and others they wove patterns of many colors and blending of stones for the sake of ornament, so as to confer upon the buildings a natural charm. And they covered with brass, and though with plaster, all the circumference of the wall which surrounded the outermost circle, and that of the inner was coated with tin. So this is interesting, because if someone can really go out there and check out this reshot in North Africa and really do an archaeological study, maybe they can find evidence of this to see if this is where Poseidon's palace was once, or is it just a freak nature of the earth of erosion and all that? I don't know, but I haven't really seen a real study on that that place in North Africa, if it's, if they found anything there, or if it's hush hush. So who knows? So the royal palace within the Acropolis was arranged in manner. In the center stood a temple. It was sacred to Plato, the wife of Poseidon, and of course Poseidon himself, which was reserved as holy ground and encircled with a wall of gold. This being the very spot where at the beginning they had generated and brought to birth the family of the 10 royal lines. Thither also they brought year by year from all 10 allotments their seasonable offerings to do sacrifice to each of those princes. And the temple of Poseidon himself was a stadia in length, 3 plethora in breadth, and of height which appeared symmetrical therewith. And there was something of a barbaric in its appearance. All the exterior of the temple they coated with silver, save only the pinnacles, and these coated with gold. As to the interior, they made the roof all of ivory in appearance, variegated with gold and silver. And all the rest of the walls and pillars and floors they covered with orlach. And they placed therein golden statues, one of that of the god Poseidon, standing on a chariot and driving 6-winged steeds.
Wow. And it says right here how it was built, what it looked like. It said it was built inside of a giant palace with a spiral roof, so you can look up at the clouds and look at the statue at the same time and make some kind of big image, I guess, the way it's described here.
It's wild, man, the way they constructed this. And then when it says the chariot and driving 6-winged steeds, I mean, what has 6 wings in the Bible?
Angel.
You know, you got the cherub and the seraphim. I mean, it's just, all this stuff just connects dots, you know. And so yeah, this figure was so tall that it touched the ridge of the roof.
Yep.
And round about him 100 Nereides on dolphins, for that was the number of them as men then believed. And it contained also many other images and the votive offerings of the private men. And outside, round about the temple, there stood images in gold of all the princes, both themselves and their wives, and as many were descended from the 10 kings, together with many other votive offerings, both of the kings and the private persons, not only from state itself, but also all foreign peoples over whom they ruled. And the altar, now this is the altar, in respect of its size and workmanship, harmonized with its surroundings, and the royal palace likewise was such befitted the greatness of the kingdom, and equally befitted the splendor of the temples. The springs they made use of, one kind of cold and another warm water, were of abundant volume, and each kind was wonderfully well adapted for use because of the natural taste and excellence of its waters. And these surrounded with buildings, with plantations of trees, such as suited the waters. And moreover, they set reservoirs round about, some under open sky, and others under cover to supply hot baths in the winter. They put separate baths for the kings and for the private citizens, besides others for women, and others again for horses, and all other beasts of burden, fitting out each in appropriate manner, and the outflowing water they conducted to the sacred grove of Poseidon, which contained trees of all kinds that of marvelous beauty and height because of the richness of the soil, and by the means of channels they led the water to the outer circles against the bridges. There they had constructed many temples for gods, many gardens, and many exercising grounds, some for men and some set apart for horses, in each of the circular belts of island. And besides the rest, they had in the center of the large island a race course laid out for horses, which was stayed in width, while as to length, a strip which ran round the whole circumference. This was reserved for equestrian contests, and round about on the side and on that were barracks for the greater part of the spearmen, but the guardhouse of the more trusty of them was posted in the smaller circle, which was near to the Acropolis, while those who were most trustworthy of all had dwellings granted to them within the Acropolis, round about the persons of the kings. Now, the shipyards, they were full with many things they needed, like the tackling and all that stuff, and they were all amply equipped in that manner. Such then was a state of things round about the abode of the kings. And after the crossing of 3 outer harbors, one found a wall which began at the sea and round in a circle at a uniform distance of 50 stadies. From the largest circle and harbor and ends converge at the seaward mouth of the channel. The whole of this wall had numerous houses built on it, set closer together, while the seaway and the largest harbor was filled with ships coming to all quarters. Now, as regards the city and the environs of the ancient dwelling, we have now well nigh completed the description and as it was originally given. He goes on, we must endeavor next to repeat the account of the rest of the country, what it was natural character was, and in what fashion it was ordered. So, the whole region rose. It was sheer out of the sea to great height, but the part about the city was all smooth and plain, enclosing it roundabout. So it was a roundabout, circle and circle and circle, and being itself encircled by mountains, which stretched as far out as the sea. So, now you listeners, you can look up what stades means, STADES, and what the measurements are of that, and it gives you when you research it, it'll give you what it is.
I wonder what message they're trying to send us when they always show Atlantis in movies still thriving, but it's underwater, and like everybody's just breathing underwater, and they have all this technology. I wonder what. There's always some kind of truth to this stuff.
I think these Atlanteans were like described Poseidon. He was also a fish god. So maybe these things are still in the ocean. They probably do have a city under there somewhere in the ocean. We don't know what's in there. We're over here sending stuff up in the sky, and we don't even know what's in our oceans. So this is a pretty big place, Atlantis, and we give a description of it. And so this the center of the island was for Poseidon, and once again his temple and all that stuff was there. And to continue this, and every they assembled in every 5th year, and they alternately every 6th year. They gave equal honor to both the even and the odd, which is kind of strange. But when thus they assembled, they took the council about public affairs and inquired if any had in any way transgressed, and gave judgment. And then when they were about to give judgment, they first gave pledges. And well, hold on. Let's see. Got a little tech issue here. Okay. Sorry about that. It happens. So the in the judgments, they first gave pledges to one another in the following description. In the sacred precincts of Poseidon, there were bulls at large, and the 10 princes, being alone by themselves, after praying to the god, they might capture a victim well pleasing unto him, hunted after the bulls with staves and nooses, but with no weapon of iron. And whatever bull they captured, they led up to the pillar, and they cut its throat over the top of the pillar, raining down blood on the inscription. And inscribed upon the pillar, besides the laws, was an oath which invoked mighty curses upon them that disobeyed. When then they had done the sacrifice according to their laws and consecrating all the limbs of the bull, they mixed a bowl of wine and poured it on behalf of each one goat of blood, and the rest carried to the fire. When they had first purged this is gross, man. But when they had first purged the pillar round about, and after this they drew out from the bowl with golden ladles, and making libation over the fire, swore to give judgment according to the laws upon the pillar, and to punish whoever had committed any previous transgression. And moreover, that henceforth they would not transgress any of their writings willingly, nor govern, nor submit to any governs edict, save in accordance with their father's law. And when each of them had made this invocation, both for himself and for his seed after him, he drank of the cup and offered it up as a gift in the temple of the god. And this god is Poseidon that they were worshiping. And after spending their interval in supping and necessary business, when darkness came over on the sacrificial fire, it had died down, the fire, all the princesses robed themselves in most beautiful sable vestments. And besides the cinders of sacramental the victims throughout the night. So this is a lot of sacrifices going on. And then extinguishing all the fire that was round about the sanctuary, there they gave and received judgment. If any of them accused any of the committing any transgression, and then they had given judgment, they wrote the judgments when it was light upon a golden tablet, and dedicated them with their robes as memorials. And there were many other special laws concerning the peculiar rights of the several princesses, whereof the most important were these: that they should never take up arms against one another, and that should anyone attempt to overthrow in any city of the royal house, they should all lend aid, taking counsel in common, like forerunners, concerning their policy in war and other matters, while conceding the leadership to the royal branch of Atlas. And that king had no authority to put to death any of his brother princesses, save with the consent of more than half of the 10 kings. Such was the magnitude and character and the power which existed in those regions at that time. And this power the God set array and brought against these regions of ours on some pretext as the following. According to the story, for many generations, so long as the inherited nature of the God remained strong in them, they were submissive to the laws and kindly disposed to their divine kindred. For the intents of their hearts were true, and in all was noble, and they showed gentleness joined with wisdom in dealing with changes and chances of life and in their dealings with one another. Consequently, they thought scorn of everything save virtue and lightly esteemed their rich possessions, bearing with ease the burden, as it were, of the vast volume of their gold and other goods, and thus their wealth did not make them drunk with pride, so that they lost control of themselves and went to ruin. Rather, in their soberness of mind, they clearly saw that all these good things are increased by general amenity combined with virtue, whereas the eager pursuit and worship of these goods only causes the goods themselves to diminish, but makes virtue also to perish with them. That's something to think about. Having riches and all this stuff. The Atlanteans weren't, at this time, they weren't worshiping that. They were worshiping their virtue. They were worshiping their goods.
Wow. That's interesting that they have more morals than most people today.
Yeah, at that time they did.
That's something to take in, ladies and gentlemen.
And as a result then of such reasoning and of their continuance of their divine nature, all their wealth had grown to such greatness as we previously described. But when the portion of divinity within them was now becoming faint and weak, through being oft times blended with a large measure of mortality.
What does that mean?
They were starting to.
Why are they getting weaker?
They're letting their wealth get to them now. They're now falling into that, into now what we are today in modern times.
But how did they take away is it saying they have supernatural abilities that they no longer have? Is that what it's saying?
They were just they were more judicious. They were more righteously. They were a righteous nation, and the mortality, whereas the human temper was becoming dominant. Now that the human side, because see, a lot of them were intermixing. Like Genesis 6, the sons of God made with the women, so they're intermixing. And
was the most of the population half angel, or is this specifically talking about the very few that were there, the 10 whatever kids and plus whatever their offspring?
The 10 kings were there. They were mating.
Plus, okay.
They were mating with human and women.
So there was a bunch of, so to say, bastards running around, right? Because I'm pretty sure he was just making as many kids as he can.
Yep.
To win, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what was going on.
Yeah.
So, so they were losing this goodness in them, and this was the start of the fall, and it became ugly to look upon, and the eyes was everyone we have the gift of sight and whatever, and for they had lost the fairest of their goods, for most precious of their parts, but in the eyes of those who gave no gift of perceiving was what is the truly happy life. It was then above all they appeared to be superbly fair and blessed, filled as with the lawless ambition and power, And Zeus, the god of gods, who reigns by law in so much as he has the gift of perceiving such things, he marked how this righteous race was in evil plight, and desired to inflict a punishment upon them, to the end that when chastised, they might strike a truer note. Wherefore he assembled together all the gods into an abode which they honor most, standing as it does at the center of all the universe, and beholding all things that partake of generation. And when he had assembled them, he spake. So what's happening here is the Atlanteans were described as a good race, as the 10 kings, everything was going good. And that divine spirit in them started turning dark. And the intermixing with humans, some postulate this, they're mixing with the Canaanites during the time of probably during the time of Jared.
It's very interesting too. This book that I dug into a while ago, Atlantis: The Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly.
Yes.
He said something about there was also the first man. Like there was two human races. There was man, and then there was like the older version of men. It's really weird how he describes two different human races in there.
Yeah, because there was
and he said there was only a little bit left of I guess I forgot what he called it, but he basically said an older race of men that was separate from the new race of men.
Yeah, because you have.
So they must have looked different then if you could differentiate them.
Yeah,
differentiate
they might look different. You have the 6-day people, and we covered that with Gary Wayne. These were people before Adam and Eve, and I'll go ahead and conjecture that the Atlanteans, those kings, those sons of God, were, they were probably, probably took up mates with those women back then, and also it probably carried along with Genesis 6, and we'll get into later what sunk Atlantis. Was it the flood of Noah? Is the flood of Noah the same as the Younger Dryas, the comet that impacted in the atmosphere, or something blew up in the atmosphere that caused the flash freezing of the dinosaurs that are found in the Antarctic, flash frozen with food still in their mouth, still chewing food, and where you see in Göbekli Tepe the inscriptions of a disaster. This. Because when you put Noah's flood, that's a different time from the Younger Dryas. But you go back to Solon and the Egyptian priest. The Egyptian priest tells them, because Solon is he's a Greek from Athens, and the priest tells them that the Greeks only know of one flood, but there have been many, and you can go back and listen to that. There have been many floods and also many catastrophes, also by fire. So, I mean, it's hard to figure out when exactly Atlantis was destroyed. But when you go to Plutarch, the Life of Solon. Here's a little tidbit on it. Solon also spent some time in studies with these Greek words are hard. I can write them down, but I just can't. I have tongue twister with this. Phanesiopus of Heliopolis in Egypt, and Sauconus of Sais, who were very learned priests. From these, as Plato says, he heard the story of the lost Atlantis, and he tried to introduce it in a poetical form to the Greeks. So Plutarch, Life of Solon 32:1, Plato ambitious to elaborate and adorn the subject of lost Atlantis as if it were the soil of a fair estate, unoccupied, but appropriately by his virtue of some kingship with Solon, began the work by laying out great porches, enclosures, and courtyards, such as no story tale or any poetic stuff ever had before. But he was late in the beginning and ended his life before his work. Therefore, the greater our delight in what he actually wrote, the greater is our distress of view what he left undone. For as the Olympion in the city of Athens, so the tale of the lost Atlantis in the wisdom of Plato is only one among many beautiful works to remain unfinished. So Plato, excuse me, he didn't finish his works, but he left us with a lot of information. And though the way he wrote it, there's his characters are described as real characters with just a fictitious name in some places, so they say. So Diodorus Siculus, and we'll talk about him a little bit, and other ancient writers who mentioned Atlantis or the Atlanteans, are inevitably referring to the native tribes and Phoenician colonies of northwest Africa in the vicinity of the Atlas Mountain range. Some Greek and Roman writers describe this continental region as the largest of the islands. So he goes on and says that, but since we have made mention of the Atlanteans and their war with the Amazons, we believe that it will not be inappropriate in this place to recount what their myths relate about the genesis of the gods, in view of the fact it does not differ greatly from the myths of the Greeks. Now the Atlanteans, dwelling as they do in the regions on the edge of Okeanos, the ocean, and inhabiting a fertile territory, and reputed far to excel their neighbors in their reverence toward the gods and humanity. They showed in their dealings with strangers and the gods, they say, were born among them. And their account many maintain in this agreement with that of the most renowned of the Greek poets, Homer's Iliad, 14,200, when he represents Hera as saying, quote, "For I go to see the ends of the bountiful earth, Okeanos, source of the gods, and the Tethys, divine, their mother." This is the account given in their myth. Their first king was Uranus, heaven, meaning heaven, and he gathered the human beings who dwelt in scattered habitations within the shelter of a walled city, and caused his subjects to cease from their lawless ways and their bestial manner of living, discovering for them the uses of cultivated fruits, how to store them up, and not a few other things which are of benefit to man. And he also subdued the larger part of the inhabited earth, in particular the regions to the west and the north. And since he was careful observer of the stars, he foretold many things which would take place throughout the world. And for the common people, he introduced the year on the basis of movement of the sun and the months that of the moon, and instructed them in the seasons which recur year after year. Consequently, the masses of people, being ignorant of internal arrangement of the stars and marveling at the events which were taking place as he had predicted, conceived that man who taught such things partook of the nature of the gods, and after had passed among men, they accorded to him immortal honors, both because of the benefactions and because of his knowledge of the stars. And then they transferred his name to the firmament of heaven, both because they thought he had seen so intimately acquainted with the risings and the settings of the stars and with whatever else took place in the firmament, and because they would surpass the benefactions by the magnitude of the honors which they would show him, and that for all subsequent time they proclaimed him to be the King of the universe. To Uranus, the myth continues, were born 45 sons from a number of wives, and of these 18, it is said, were by Timaeus, which of them bearing a distinct name, but all of them as a group were called after their mothers, Titanius, or Titans, because she was prudent and had brought many good deeds for the peoples, was deified after her death by those whom she had helped, and her name was changed to Ge, which means earth. To Uranus were also born daughters, the two eldest of whom were by far the most renowned above the others, and were called Basilia, which means queen, and Rhea, with whom also named Pandora. Of these daughters, Basilia, who was the eldest and far excelled the others in both prudence and understanding, reared all her brothers, showing them collectively a mother's kindness. Consequently, she was given the appellation of Great Mother, and after her father had been translated from among men into the circle of the gods, with the approval of masses and her brothers. She succeeded to the royal dignity, though she was still a maiden, and because of her exceedingly great chastity, had been unwilling to unite in marriage with any man. But later, because of her desire to leave sons who would succeed to the throne, she united in marriage with Hyperion, one of her brothers, from whom she had the greatest affection. And when they were born to her 2 children, Helios, the sun, and Selene, the moon, who were greatly admired for both their beauty and their chastity. And the brothers of Basilia, they say, being envious of her because of her happy issue of children, and fearing that Hyperion would divert world power to himself, committed an utterly impious deed. For entering into conspiracy among themselves, they put Hyperion to the sword, and casting him, Helios, which is the child pantheon of myth, who was still in years a child, and into the Eridanos River. They drowned him, and this crime came to light. Selene, who loved her brother very greatly, threw herself down from the roof. But as for his mother, while seeking his body along the river. Her strength left her, and falling into a swoon, she beheld a vision, which she thought that Helios stood over her and urged her not to mourn the death of her children. For he said Tatianes would meet the punishment which they deserve, while her sister would be transformed by some divine providence into mortal natures, since which had formerly been called the holy fire in the heavens, which was called by men the sun, Helios. And that addresses the Mene, which would be called the moon, Selene. So that's where you get a lot of for me, a lot of the sun worship, the Egyptians and other cultures, and you get the moon worship out of the Middle East. So all the stuff you see comes from the ancient tales of Atlantis, and we'll close it out in just a little bit. So when she arose from the swoon, she recounted the common crowd as both dream and misfortunes which had befallen her, asking that they render her to the dead and the honors like those accorded to the gods, and asserting that no man should thereafter touch her body. And after this, she became frenzied, and seizing such of her daughters' playthings as could make she was obviously upset. She began to wander over the land, and her hair hanging free inspired the noise of the kettle drums and cymbals, so that those who saw her were struck with astonishment. And all the men were filled with pity at her misfortune, and some were clinging to her body. And when there came a mighty storm and continuous crashes of thunder and lightning, and then in the midst of this, Basilia passed from sight, whereupon the crowds of people were amazed at the reversal of fortune, transferred the names and honors of Helios and Selene to the stars of the sky. As for their mother, they considered her to be a goddess, and they started erecting altars to her, and imitating the incidents of her life by pounding on the kettle drums and the clash of the cymbals. They rendered unto her in the way of sacrifices and all other honors. So this is from Diodorus Siculus, and we'll continue. We were gonna summarize Atlantis, but might as well let you have it all. So that's part 2 of Poseidon, the rise and fall of Atlantis, and we're bringing you different historians on the different gods. That's it for me.